I felt my heart stop when I saw the post. There he was, my only son, Raymond, standing next to a woman I'd never met. They were both smiling in a wedding photo, but something was missing. Me. My name is Eva Baldwin. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in this little house in Scottsdale, Arizona for most of my adult life. It was a Tuesday morning, just like any other. The sun was already heating up the patio, and I was on my second cup of coffee, scrolling through Facebook to see what my cousins back east were up to. And that's when it popped up. It wasn't even a post from Raymond. It was from some woman I didn't know, Leah something or other. She had tagged him. The picture was bright, professional. Raymond was in a tuxedo, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. Next to him, this woman, Leah, was in a white gown, holding a bouquet. But that wasn't the part that made my breath catch. It was the other two people in the photo, an older couple, smiling proudly, standing right next to Raymond and his bride. Her parents. They were all posed together, this perfect, complete family unit. My first thought was, this is a joke. Maybe it was from a play or a movie he was working on. He did something with computers. I was never entirely sure. But the caption cleared that up right away. So thrilled to officially welcome Raymond to our family. Leah and Raymond's wedding was a perfect day. My coffee mug slipped from my hand. It didn't break. Thank God. It just hit the carpet with a dull thud, spilling lukewarm coffee onto the beige rug. I didn't even bother to clean it up. I just stared at the screen. My only son. Married. I hadn't heard a single word about it. Not a mom. I met someone. Not a mom. I'm engaged. Nothing. The last time we'd spoken, just 2 weeks ago, he'd said he was busy with a big project at work. He'd sounded a little distant, but that was normal for Raymond these days. My hand was shaking as I clicked on the post. It was public. The comments were flooding in. Congratulations. What a beautiful couple. Leah, your dress is stunning. So happy for you and your parents. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my ribs. Dozens of comments. Friends of his, people I recognized. Friends of hers. I assumed. Even my own cousin, Cheryl, had liked the post. Had she known? My eyes searched for one thing. My name. A single comment asking, where's his mom? Or, I'm sure his mother, Eva, is so proud. There was nothing. It was as if I didn't exist. As if the woman who had raised him, who had held him when he was sick, who had worked 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed after his father passed, as if that woman had simply vanished. I wasn't just uninvited. I was erased. I felt a cold, prickling sweat on the back of my neck. I exited the post and went straight to Raymond's Facebook page. And there it was. He had changed his status. Married to Leah Miller. And a whole album of photos. The ceremony on a beach. The reception. Cutting the cake. Him dancing with her mother. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. That was supposed to be my dance. Ever since he was a little boy, I'd imagined that moment. I dreamed of it. It was the one thing I'd held on to, the one reward I'd promised myself for all the hard years. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping on the screen. I pulled up his contact and hit call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, the click. Hi, you've reached Raymond. I can't get to the phone right now. Leave a message. His voice, so calm and normal, felt like a slap in the face. I didn't leave a message. I hung up and called again, straight to voicemail. He'd rejected the call. I opened up my text messages. What do you even type? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. You got married? I typed. It looked so small and stupid on the screen. I hit send. I sat there watching the phone. The message delivered, but the little bubble that said read never appeared. He had my message. He was seeing it. and he was choosing not to answer. I looked around my living room. The photos on the mantel were all of Raymond. His high school graduation, his college graduation, a picture of us at the Grand Canyon, just a few years ago, before he'd started getting so busy. This was the house he grew up in, the house I had kept all these years, thinking one day he would want it, thinking one day he would bring his family here for holidays. I'd been living my life for him, waiting for his next milestone, and he had just passed the biggest one of all without me. I looked back at the screen, at the picture of him with his new in-laws, all of them beaming. They looked so happy. He looked happy. And I, his mother, was sitting alone in Scottsdale, staring at a coffee stain on my carpet, feeling like a stranger in my own son's life. The shock was starting to fade, and what replaced it was a cold, deep ache. It was a betrayal so complete, so total, that I couldn't even begin to understand it. I sat there, staring at the phone, for a long, long time. The house was silent. It was always silent these days. My eyes drifted from the dark screen in my hand to the photos on the mantel. There was Raymond in his little league uniform, all gap-toothed and grinning. There he was on his first day of high school, looking so gangly and awkward in a shirt that was too big for him. And in every single one, I was there, too, my arm around his shoulder, my face beaming with a pride that I felt in my very bones. My husband, Clifford, passed away when Raymond was just 3, a brain aneurysm. 1 minute he was here, arguing with me about planting roses, and the next he was gone. I was 35. Suddenly, I was a widow and a single mother. Raymond barely remembered his father, which I suppose was both a blessing and a curse. He didn't have the acute sense of loss, but he also never knew what it was like to have a dad. He only had me, and I made a promise to myself, standing over Clifford's grave, that it wouldn't matter. I would be enough. I would be both mother and father. I would give that boy everything he ever needed, and I would never let him feel like he was missing out. And I did. Lord, how I tried. I can still smell the bleach and stale coffee from the diner. I kept my day job as a receptionist at the dental office, of course, but from 6 to midnight, 4 nights a week, I was on my feet slinging hash browns and refilling coffee cups. My feet would ache so badly that sometimes I'd just sit in the car for 10 minutes before driving home, trying to get the feeling back in them. I remember one night so clearly. Raymond was 17. He was a smart boy, so smart. He was looking at all these big-name colleges, the kind I'd only ever read about. I was at the kitchen table well past midnight with a pile of bills on one side and his college brochures on the other. The application fees alone were nearly $400. I was rubbing my temples, trying to figure out which bill I could skip when he padded into the kitchen. He saw the brochures and the bills. He saw the look on my face. "Don't worry about it, Mom," he said, his voice low. "I'll just apply to the state school. It's cheaper. It's fine." I looked at his face, and I saw him pulling back. I saw that quiet disappointment, that look of a kid trying to make himself smaller, so he wouldn't be a burden. It put a sliver of ice in my heart. I reached across the table and put my hand on his. "You will apply to every single school on this list," I told him. "You will apply to any school you want. I will handle the money. You just handle the grades." The next day, I picked up a 5th night at the diner. He got into 3 of those schools. The day we dropped him off at his dorm, I cried the whole 8-hour drive home. Not from sadness, but from pride. I had done it. I had gotten him there. I always dreamed of his wedding. It was the one milestone I looked forward to, the one moment where I could finally sit back and just be the mother of the groom. We were at my cousin Cheryl's wedding, the same Cheryl who just liked his wedding post on Facebook, and Raymond was about 12. He was watching Cheryl dance with her father. Then came the mother-son dance. I must have let out a little sigh. Raymond, who was always so serious and perceptive, looked up at me. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Oh, nothing, honey," I said, fixing his clip-on tie. "It's just, that's such a lovely moment. The mother-son dance. It's special." He nodded, then he took my hand. In front of everyone, he put his other hand on my waist in a formal, awkward, 12-year-old way. "Mom, when I get married," he said, his voice dead serious, "you're going to have the first dance. Not my wife. You. I promise. You're going to be right there with me." It was such a sweet, silly promise from a little boy. But my heart sealed it away. I held on to that promise for 20 years. I'd think about it. I'd wonder what song he'd pick. It was my reward. And now, all I could see was that photo. Him in a tuxedo, with his arm wrapped around his new wife's mother. They were dancing. He was smiling at her. All those sacrifices, all those lonely nights, all those years I never remarried, never even dated, because my life was him. My job was to get him launched, and I did. And this is what I get. It wasn't an oversight. You don't forget to tell your only parent that you are getting married. You don't forget to send an invitation. This was a choice. He and his new wife and his new family had a conversation. They planned a wedding. They made a guest list. And they made a decision. I was not on it. As I sat there in my quiet living room, that was the one thought that kept circling. He didn't just forget me. He actively, deliberately hid it. He looked at the biggest moment of his life and decided I had no place in it. And the worst part was, I had no idea why. The rest of that day is a complete blur. I don't think I moved from the couch. I didn't clean up the coffee stain. I didn't eat lunch. I didn't even get up to use the bathroom. I just sat there in my living room as the sun moved across the sky, casting long shadows from the furniture that stretched across the floor, and then finally faded to black. The house got cold, but I didn't get up to turn on the heat. I didn't turn on a single light. I just sat in the dark with my phone in my hand, staring at a blank screen. I kept thinking, this hurts. It hurts in a way I haven't felt in, well, ever. When my husband Clifford died, my world ended. The grief was a tidal wave. It was so big, so final, it just washed over me and drowned me. For months, I was just trying to keep my head above water. But this was different. This wasn't a wave. This was a knife. It was a cold, sharp, twisting feeling in my gut. Grief is passive. It happens to you. You're a victim of fate, of sickness, of an accident. People understand it. They bring you casseroles, and they hug you, and they tell you he's in a better place. Betrayal is active. Someone does it to you. My husband was taken from me. My son left me. He just walked away, and he didn't even bother to close the door quietly. And that's when the awful, looping questions started. The ones that crawl into your head in the dark and just won't leave. What did I do? That was the first one. The big one. I must have done something. You don't just erase your own mother for no reason. I started picking apart every conversation we'd had for the last 6 months. Was I too critical of his job? Did I ask too many questions? Did I not ask enough? When he called 2 weeks ago, he'd sounded rushed. I'd chalked it up to work. I'd said, well, don't work too hard. Honey, remember to eat. Had that been it? A simple, motherly comment? Had he hung up the phone and thought, she's so overbearing. I'm not telling her about the wedding. Or maybe it was her. Leah, this woman I'd never seen, never heard of. Maybe she didn't like me. But how could she? She'd never met me. Had he told her things about me? Had he painted me as some kind of monster, some clinging, lonely old woman that she wouldn't want at her perfect wedding? That thought made me sick. Actually, physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched into the toilet. but nothing came up. I was just dry heaving, my stomach clenching in knots. Was I that old woman now? Was I an embarrassment? I've always tried so hard to keep up. I learned how to use a computer. I learned how to text and send photos. I got on Facebook, for goodness sake, just to see his life. I never called him during work hours. I always waited for him to call me. I tried so hard not to be one of those mothers, the meddling, interfering, guilt-tripping kind. I wanted to be the supportive mom, the cool mom, if there is such a thing. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd been too supportive. Maybe I'd been so hands-off, I'd made myself irrelevant. I'd given him so much space that he just floated away. I went back to the living room and finally turned on a lamp. The light stung my eyes. I saw my reflection in the dark television screen, a 68-year-old woman with tired eyes and graying hair. I thought of all the years I'd put myself last. It wasn't even a conscious choice. It was just the way it was. The new dresses I didn't buy so he could have the best computer for school. The weekend trips with my girlfriends I skipped because he had a baseball tournament. The men who'd shown interest in me over the years after Clifford passed. I'd never given any of them a second thought. My life was about Raymond. My job was to get him launched, to make sure he was happy, successful, and whole. I had centered my entire world around this one person, and I'd done it gladly. I thought I was building a bond, a foundation, a family, but it turned out I was just building his launch pad. And once he took off, he never looked back. I looked at my phone again. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. The battery was at 4%. I'd been sitting there for almost 12 hours. I opened the text message thread again. You got married? Still there. Still just delivered. Not read. He was married. He was probably on his honeymoon right now, lying on a beach somewhere with his new wife, laughing, starting their new life, a life that apparently had no room for me. He hadn't just forgotten me. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had dumped me. He had thrown me away like a piece of old luggage he didn't want to bother carrying into his new life. That was the moment my world didn't just crack. It shattered. The shock was gone. The confusion was gone. All that was left was this cold, hollow, empty feeling. I sat down at my kitchen table, the one where I'd helped him with his homework, the one where we'd eaten thousands of meals, just the two of us. And I put my head in my hands, and I cried. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a silent, aching, broken-hearted cry for the son I thought I had and the life I thought I'd built. I didn't sleep in my bed. I think I dozed off in the recliner in the living room, the one Clifford used to love. When I woke up, my back was aching, and the sun was already high in the sky. My first thought, my very first conscious thought, was, it wasn't a dream. I picked up my phone. The battery was dead. I plugged it in by my bed, and as it booted up, my heart thumped, hoping, praying that there would be a long message from him. An explanation. An apology. The phone lit up. I had 2 notifications. One was a reminder to take my blood pressure pill. The other was from Facebook. Your cousin Cheryl posted for the first time in a while. Nothing from Raymond. My text message, you got married, was still sitting there. Just delivered. Okay. Maybe I'd been too blunt. Maybe I'd shocked him. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to think. What do you say? How do you handle this? I had to try again. I had to let him know I wasn't just angry. I was hurt. I typed, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy. Raymond, honey, it's Mom. I saw the photos. I'm just very confused. I need you to call me. Please just tell me you're okay. I love you. I sent it. And then the waiting began. That first day, I was a wreck. I couldn't sit still. I'd put the phone in my pocket and pace the house, feeling for the vibration every few seconds. I'd put it on the kitchen counter and stare at it while I pretended to wipe down cabinets I'd already cleaned. Every time a car drove by, I'd jump, thinking it was him. But he was in. Where was he? He lived in California now. He wouldn't just drive up. The day came and went. Nothing. The next morning, I tried a different approach. Maybe he was scared of my reaction. Maybe I should pretend to be normal. "Hi, honey," I typed. "Just checking in. I know you said you had a big project at work. Hope it all went well. Give me a call when you get a minute." I looked at the message. It felt so fake, so weak, but I sent it anyway. Again, nothing. The silence in the house was becoming a physical thing. It was heavy. It pressed down on me. I turned on the television just to have some noise, but the people on the game shows all looked so happy, it made me sick. I turned it off. 2 more days went by. This was day 4. I was moving from hurt to a strange, simmering anger. How dare he treat me like this? I had been nothing but a good mother to him. I went to the grocery store just to see other human beings. My neighbor, Carol, saw me in the produce aisle. "Eva, you look tired. Hon, everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Oh, just a little under the weather. Haven't been sleeping well." What was I supposed to say? My son, my entire life, just got married and didn't tell me, and is now ignoring my calls. I feel like a fool. You can't say that to a neighbor. The shame of it was almost as bad as the hurt. I went home. I was done being nice. I was done being understanding. I was a mother, and I was in pain. "Raymond Baldwin, I am your mother. I have been calling and texting you for 4 days. I know you see these messages. What you have done is cruel. It is a cruel, heartless thing to do. I am begging you as your mother to have the decency to answer me. What did I do to deserve this? Please just talk to me." I sent it. It felt good for about 10 seconds. Then the dread washed back in. Maybe that was the text that would make him block me forever. Another day passed. Nothing. I was starting to give up. I felt myself just going numb. I was staring out the back window at a cactus, wondering if I should water it, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I've never moved so fast in my life. My heart leaped into my throat. I grabbed it, my hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. It was a text from Raymond. My eyes scanned the screen, desperate for the words, "I'm sorry," or "I can explain." But that's not what it said. It was 4 words. "We'll talk soon, Mom." That was it. That was all. Not, "I love you." Not, "I'm on my honeymoon." Not, "I know you're hurt." Just, "We'll talk soon, Mom." It was a text you send to your dentist. It was a text you send to a coworker you're trying to brush off. It was cold, it was dismissive, and it was, in that one moment, more painful than the entire week of silence. The silence I could fill with excuses. He's busy. He's on a plane. He lost his phone. He's scared. This text, this was a choice. This was intentional. This was, "You are not my priority. Your feelings are a problem I will deal with later when I have time." And that text broke the last thread of hope I'd been clinging to. I started to think back, really think back. When did this all start? It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. He used to call every Sunday like clockwork. Sometime last year, that became every other Sunday. Then it was just a text message. "Hey, Mom, all good here. Hope you are too." Last Christmas, he was supposed to fly in. He'd canceled 2 days before. "Work, Mom," he'd said. "We're up against a huge deadline. I'll make it up to you, I promise." I'd spent the holiday alone. I'd told myself it was fine, that his career was important. I'd ask him about his life. How's work? Good. Seeing anyone? Not really, Mom. He'd lied. He hadn't just met this woman. He must have been seeing her for months, maybe years. A whole life he was living that he'd deliberately hidden from me. He'd been building a wall, brick by brick, and I was so busy trying to be the cool, supportive mom that I never even saw it until I was completely on the outside. He hadn't just forgotten me. This wasn't an oversight. This was a plan. I looked at his forward text again. "We'll talk soon, Mom." And for the first time, I had a new thought. I didn't want to talk. What was there to say? I didn't want to hear his excuses. I didn't want to hear him try to justify this. I didn't want to cry on the phone to him. The boy I had raised, the one who'd promised me that dance, he was gone. He had been gone for a long time. The man who'd sent this text was a stranger. I set the phone down on the counter. I didn't text him back. I didn't say when or "I'm hurting." I said nothing. For the first time in my life, I had absolutely nothing to say to my son. I stared at that forward text message for I don't know how long. "We'll talk soon, Mom." It wasn't an apology. It was a postponement. It was something you say to an acquaintance, not to your mother whose heart you just ripped out. I finally set the phone down, screen side down, on the kitchen counter. I didn't throw it. I wasn't angry anymore. The fiery, sharp pain from the day before had burned itself out. All that was left was this cold, heavy ash. I was just empty. I had spent a week of my life crying, begging, and torturing myself, and this was the response. "We'll talk soon." I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, my eyes wide open in the dark, staring at the shadows the moonlight made on my ceiling. I listened to the house, the big 4-bedroom house. I heard the refrigerator hum. I heard the air conditioner click on. I heard the floorboards creak as the house settled. It was so quiet. It was the loneliest sound in the world. At some point, around 3 in the morning, I got up. I walked through the halls. I didn't turn on any lights. I just walked, my hand brushing against the wallpaper. I stopped at the door to Raymond's old room. I hadn't changed a thing. His high school baseball trophy was on the shelf. His old desk was in the corner. This room was a shrine to a boy who didn't exist anymore. I walked into the living room. I looked at the photos on the mantel, all of him. I stood in the formal dining room we hadn't used in 10 years, and a question hit me so hard and so clearly, it felt like someone had spoken it out loud. What am I still doing here? I loved this house, but it was too big. The yard was too much for me to handle. The pool sat in the back, collecting leaves, a constant, expensive chore. Why did I stay here? The answer was immediate. I stayed for him. I stayed because this was Raymond's childhood home. I stayed because I was keeping it for him. This was supposed to be his inheritance. And it wasn't just my house. This was the Baldwin house. It had belonged to Clifford's parents before us. We'd bought it from his mother's estate when Raymond was just a baby. This house was the only real physical link Raymond had to his father's family. It held all the memories, mine, his father's, and his grandparents. I was the keeper of that legacy. I'd held on to it all these years, imagining the day he'd come back, maybe with a wife and kids, and they would run down these same hallways. That was the dream. He would inherit it, and the Baldwin name would continue in this house. But as I stood there in the dark, I realized I had been protecting memories for a man who was actively trying to erase his. He was off starting a new family, a family that apparently didn't include me. He didn't care about the Baldwin legacy. He didn't care about his mother. He had made a very clear choice. And in that cold, quiet, 3 in the morning darkness, I felt a new feeling. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. a cold, sharp clarity that cut through everything else. I was 68 years old. How many good, healthy years did I have left? 10, 15, if I was lucky? Was I going to spend a single one more of them sitting in this empty shrine, waiting for a man who treated me like a chore? No, I was done waiting. He'd made his decision about his life. Now, I was going to make mine. I didn't wait for the sun to come up at 5 a.m. I was at my desk, looking up the number for a realtor. A woman named Brenda, whose face was on for sale signs all over Scottsdale. I'd heard she was a shark. Good. I needed a shark. At 8:01 a.m., I called her office. Her voice was bright and chipper. Brenda's Realty, this is Brenda. My voice, by contrast, was perfectly calm. Good morning, Brenda. My name is Eva Baldwin. I live at 1245 Mesquite Drive. I'd like to sell my house. There was a half-second of silence. Eva, yes, the beautiful brick two-story on the corner. I've admired that home for years. Are you thinking of downsizing? I'm thinking of leaving. I said, I was told the market is very hot right now. It's on fire, Eva, she said, her voice dropping into a professional gear. A home like yours, with that yard, it won't last a week. We can get you top dollar. Good, I said. When can you come over? She was there by noon. She walked through, gushing about the good bones and the solid construction. All I saw were ghosts. All I saw was wasted space. This is the house my son grew up in, I told her as we stood in the kitchen. I've been holding on to it for him. Oh, that's so sweet, she said. He just got married. I continued, my voice as flat as the countertop. He didn't invite me. I found out on Facebook. I'm selling it. I want a cash offer, and I want to close as fast as possible. Brenda's chipper smile vanished. She looked at me, really looked at me, and nodded once. Leave it to me, she said. The for sale sign went up in the yard that very afternoon. It felt powerful. My neighbor, Carol, saw it and rushed over, her hand to her chest. Eva, you're moving? Is everything all right? Is it Raymond? I gave her a smile. The first real one in a week. Everything is fine, Carol. I'm just ready for a new adventure. A fresh start. It was a blur. The house was on the market for 48 hours. We had 3 offers, all over the asking price. I took the one that was all cash from a young couple who could close in 10 days. It was bittersweet, of course. Packing up 35 years of my life was hard. I stood in Raymond's room, holding his Little League trophy. I found his first pair of shoes. I found Clifford's old watch. I cried, but it wasn't that broken, helpless cry. It was a goodbye. I was saying goodbye to the life I'd had, to the woman I had been. I had been holding on to this house, this idea of a family, with both hands so tightly I couldn't move. I realized Raymond hadn't just taken me for granted. He'd taken this for granted, too. He assumed it would all just be sitting here, waiting for him whenever he decided to talk soon. He was wrong. You don't get to inherit a life you've abandoned. As I taped up the last box, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt peace. I felt light. For the first time in my entire adult life, I had no idea what I was going to do tomorrow. And I couldn't wait. I signed the last paper, handed the keys to the new owners, a nice young couple, so excited they reminded me of Clifford and me once, and I drove away from that house on Mesquite Drive. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I just pointed my car north and drove. I had no plan, not really. I just knew I had to go somewhere completely different, somewhere that held no memories. I'd always loved pictures of the mountains, so I drove until the red rocks of Arizona turned into the flat plains of the Panhandle, and then, finally, into the high peaks of Colorado. I ended up in Boulder. I don't know why, exactly. It just felt right. It was a world away from Scottsdale. The air was crisp and cool, even in the late afternoon. The mountains looked like a postcard, sharp against a blue sky. I found a small, two-bedroom apartment for rent in a quiet complex. It was on the second floor, with a little balcony that looked out at the trees. It was less than half the size of my old house. It was perfect. The first few nights were strange. The silence was different here. In Scottsdale, the silence was heavy, full of things unsaid, full of waiting. Here, it was just quiet. It was peaceful. I bought a new coffee pot. I bought new sheets. I bought a comfortable chair for the balcony and a thick blanket. For the first week, I just was. I sat on that balcony, wrapped in my blanket, and I drank my coffee. I watched people walk their dogs. I watched the leaves start to turn yellow, and I realized my phone was in my purse and I hadn't checked it once. I hadn't thought about Raymond or his new wife or that text message. I was just breathing. After about a week, I knew I had to get out. I couldn't just sit on my balcony forever. I was 68, not dead. I'd always loved books, so I walked down to the local public library. It was a beautiful, big, modern building. I saw a flyer on the community board. Friends of the library bookstore needs volunteers. The next day, I walked in. I was nervous. I felt like I was on my first day of school. The manager, a woman younger than my son, was sweet. She put me to work in the little bookstore in the lobby, sorting donations with another volunteer. Her name was Marge. She was probably a few years older than me, with bright purple glasses and a laugh that boomed. She didn't ask me where I was from, or if I was married, or if I had kids. She just handed me a stack of dusty paperbacks and said, "All right, Han, we've got a mission. We need to find every romance novel with a man in a kilt on the cover. We have a buyer who's obsessed." For the next 2 hours, we just sorted and chatted. We talked about the books. We talked about a new cafe that had opened up. She told me about a hiking trail that was easy on the knees. At one point, I let out a real, genuine laugh. The kind that starts in your belly. It felt rusty, like I hadn't used it in a long time. When my shift was over, Marge said, "You're back on Thursday, right? Don't wear a white shirt." The history section is a disaster. I walked home. It was only a mile. I felt lighter. I had a place to be on Thursday. It was that simple. That evening, I was unpacking one of the last boxes, one I'd labeled Misk. Inside, underneath some old photo albums I wasn't ready to look at, was a canvas bag. I opened it. My old knitting needles. I hadn't seen them in, good Lord, at least 20 years. I used to knit all the time before Raymond was born. I'd loved it. I just stopped. There was never time. His sports, his homework, my second job. Knitting was a luxury I couldn't afford. The next day, I went to a yarn shop. I was lost. The woman who owned it helped me pick out some yarn. It was a bright, almost obnoxious shade of blue. I went home, sat on my new couch, and I cast on. I was all thumbs. My stitches were too tight, then too loose. The scarf I was trying to make looked lumpy and full of holes, and I just didn't care. I wasn't making it for anyone. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't for a future grandchild. I was just doing it. My hands were busy. My mind was quiet. I sat there, knitting this lumpy blue scarf, and I thought about the last 35 years. My entire life had been a reaction to someone else. First, it was reacting to Clifford's death. Then, it was reacting to Raymond's needs. I was Raymond's mom. That was my job. That was my whole identity. Even my hurt, it was a reaction to him. I had done that job. I'd done it well. He was launched. And now he was gone. But I was still here. I looked around my little apartment. My apartment. I'd chosen the paint. I'd chosen the couch. I was eating what I wanted for dinner when I wanted. I was going to volunteer at a bookstore on Thursday. I was knitting a terrible, ugly, wonderful blue scarf. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I wasn't living for anyone else. I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't holding my breath for the next milestone or the next crisis. I was just Eva. I put the knitting down and went to find my phone. It was in my other purse, still on silent. I had a missed call from 2 days ago, an unknown number. I didn't recognize it. I felt a small jolt of nothing, not panic, not hope, not anger. I just looked at it. Then I put the phone on the kitchen counter and went back to my knitting. I had a new life to build, and I was for the first time free. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew one thing. I was finally ready to live for myself. It had been several weeks. My new life in Boulder had started to take on a rhythm. I'd volunteer at the library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'd joined a simple yoga class for seniors at the community center. I was knitting. I was reading. I was, for the first time in my life, just calm. I'd just gotten home from the library. Marge and I had spent 2 hours laughing over a box of donated cookbooks from the 1970s, full of jellied salads. I was putting the kettle on for a cup of tea, feeling good, feeling light. And then my phone rang. It was sitting on the kitchen counter. I looked over, and my heart didn't leap. It didn't pound with hope. It just stopped. The screen said, "Raymond." I stared at it. It rang and rang. I thought about not answering. I really did. I thought, I don't have to, but I knew if I didn't, he would just keep calling. I took a deep breath, let it ring one more time, and then I picked it up. I pressed accept. I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Mom." His voice was high, tight, not calm. He sounded out of breath. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Raymond," I said. My voice was even. "I'm in Boulder." "Boulder? What's in Boulder?" "I went to the house." "Mom, I went to the house. There's a sold sign on the lawn, and there's a different car in the driveway. What did you do?" He was panicked, and I realized he wasn't calling to ask if I was okay. He wasn't calling to apologize for the wedding. He was calling about the house. "I sold it," I said, as calmly as if I were telling him the time. There was a choked sound on the other end. "You what? You sold it? You can't just sell it without talking to me." "You got married without talking to me, Raymond," I said. "That's not the same thing," he shouted. And I could hear the real panic in his voice now, the genuine distress. "That's not. Mom, that's Grandma's house. That's our house. The house I grew up in. The one you promised you'd always keep in the family. I wanted my kids to grow up there. How could you just erase it? All our memories? How could you do that?" I listened. I let him finish his whole, frantic speech. I heard the break in his voice. He was, I realized, actually crying, but he wasn't crying for me. He was crying for the bricks. He was crying for the inheritance he'd taken for granted. The silence stretched for a moment. I looked out my new window at the mountains. "Raymond," I said, and my voice was so calm, it surprised even me. "You made a decision about your family's future without me. So I made one about mine." What does that mean?" he sputtered. I messed up, Mom. I know that. I'm sorry about the wedding. We were going to tell you. Leah, it was just a whirlwind, and her parents were right there, and I was going to call you. I almost laughed. "Were you, Raymond?" "When? In that text you sent, the one that said, 'We'll talk soon'? You sent that to me like I was a dentist you were trying to reschedule. That's not. I was on my honeymoon. I didn't know what to say. But you can't undo this. You're right, I said. I can't. And you can't undo what you did. You stood up at a wedding with her parents next to you, and you started a new family. You made it very clear what your priorities were. And you weren't one of them. I was wrong. I was wrong, okay? I'm sorry. But to sell the house, Mom, that's vindictive. That's cruel. I thought about his word. Cruel. Was it Raymond? Or was it just the consequence? You see, for 35 years, I've been Raymond's mom. I've lived in that house, alone, for a decade. I've kept it up. I've paid the taxes. I've mowed the lawn. I did it all waiting for you to come home for Christmas, waiting for you to bring home a nice girl, waiting for the grandchildren you just assumed you'd raise in my house. I was a fool, I continued, to think you'd even notice. You were off building a whole new life, a life you hid from me. You made your choice, Raymond. You chose your new family. You're an adult, and I am, too. And my choice was to stop being a caretaker for a house full of memories you only seemed to care about once it was gone. He was quiet. The only sound was his hitched breathing. He was trying to process it. I can't believe it's gone, he whispered. And that was it. That was the heart of it. He didn't say, I can't believe I hurt you this badly. He said, I can't believe it is gone. I'm sorry you're upset about the house, Raymond, I said, and I meant it in a distant way. But my decision is final. I'm here now. I have a new life. The kettle behind me started to whistle. It was a loud, shrieking sound in the quiet of my apartment. I have to go now, I said. My tea is ready. Mom, wait. I didn't wait. I pressed the red end button on the screen. I stood there for a long moment. My hand was shaking, just a little, but I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I felt light. The last heavy chain I'd been dragging around for 35 years had just snapped. He finally understood. He'd lost something, not just the house. He'd lost the mother who would have waited by the phone. That woman was gone. I turned and poured the hot water into my mug. I was, for the first time, free. And I was ready for my tea. I made my tea. I sat down in the comfortable chair I bought for my new living room. My hand was, in fact, shaking, just a little. It was the adrenaline, I suppose, the kind you get after a car wreck or a big, life-changing argument. I'd stood up to my son, not as a scolding mother, and not as a crying, hysterical victim. I had spoken to him as an equal, as one adult who had been wronged by another, and I had told him the truth. I sipped the tea. It was hot, and it grounded me. I replayed the conversation in my head. I heard his voice, that high-pitched panic. How could you erase it? He'd asked. He was crying. My son was, for the first time in his adult life, crying on the phone, and it was for a building. He didn't call to say, Mom, I've been a terrible son. I am so sorry I hurt you. He called to say, Mom, you've taken away my inheritance. I am so angry you hurt me. And that, right there, was the whole story. That was the validation for every single thing I had done. He hadn't seen me until I took away something he wanted. My pain was invisible to him. His was the only pain that mattered. He used the word vindictive. I let that word hang in the air of my quiet apartment. Was I vindictive? Maybe. I'm human. Maybe there was a part of me, a small, dark, wounded part, that wanted to make him feel a fraction of the erasure I felt. He'd taken away my mother-son dance. He'd taken away my place at his table. So, I'd taken away the house. He'd made it clear I wasn't part of his future. So, I'd made it clear he wasn't part of mine. But as I sat there, I realized it was so much more than that. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. My entire life, my role was to give. I gave my time, my energy, my body, my youth, my money, my sleep. I gave and gave and gave. And Raymond took. That was our dynamic. I was the giver. He was the taker. And I'd never minded. That's what mothers do, isn't it? But when he got married, he didn't just take. He threw away. He threw me away. And that "we'll talk soon" text, that was him, trying to put me back on a shelf like a toy he was done playing with, but might want again later. Selling that house was the first time in my life I had taken something back. I took back my future. I took back my financial security. I took back the power to decide what my life was going to look like. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about saving me. The next morning, I went to my yoga class. I was a little stiff, but as I stood in that room with 8 other women, all of us just trying to breathe and stretch, I felt good. My body felt like my own. After, I went to the library. Marge was there, sorting through a new pile of donations. "Eva," she said, smiling, "you'll never guess what we got. A first edition copy of a Julia Child cookbook." "Oh, heavens," I said, "all that butter." We talked for an hour about cooking and the weather and a new exhibit at the local museum. It was so normal, so wonderfully, blessedly normal. I was just Eva, a volunteer, a woman in a yoga class, a knitter. I was building a new identity, one that wasn't mother of. It was just me, and I liked her. I was starting to really like her. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about Raymond. I did. I still loved him. That's the part that hurts. That part of your heart doesn't just turn off like a light switch. He was my son, my baby. I loved him, but it was a different love now. It was a sadder, wiser love. It was a love that had to stay on my side of the wall. It wasn't a love that begged or waited or made excuses for bad behavior. It was a love that said, "I will always love you, but I am no longer responsible for you, and I will not let you hurt me again." Our relationship was changed forever. It wasn't just broken. It was reset. And I was the one who was setting the terms now. I was no longer the mother who waits by the phone for a call. I was the woman who hangs up to make her tea. I sat on my little balcony that evening, wrapped in that lumpy blue scarf I'd finally finished. The air was cool and clean. I was proud of myself. I'd made the toughest decision of my life. I had walked away from everything I knew, from the entire identity I'd spent my life building. I had, in a way, set my old life on fire and walked away. And it was terrifying. But I had done it. I had chosen myself. Maybe one day Raymond will understand why I did what I did. Maybe when he's older, he'll realize that he didn't just lose a house. He lost the right to take me for granted. He lost the mother who would have forgiven anything just to be in the room. But even if he never understands, it's okay. I've stopped waiting for him. I don't regret my decision. I found my peace. The seasons had turned. The bright yellows of the bolder aspens had faded, and there was a bite in the air. It had been months since that phone call with Raymond. I hadn't heard a word from him since I'd hung up, and I was truly okay with that. My life was my own. My little apartment felt like a home. Marge and I were planning a small Thanksgiving for 2 at her place. I was content. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd just gotten back from my yoga class, my mat still tucked under my arm. I was fumbling for my keys in the hallway when I saw them, standing right in front of my apartment door. Raymond, and a woman I'd only ever seen on Facebook. Leah. My blood went cold. How did they even get into the building? How did they find me? I'd never given him my new address. He must have had to hire someone or do some serious digging. Raymond looked awful. He looked like he'd lost weight. His eyes were red-rimmed and tired, and he had the look of a man who hadn't slept in a week. The woman, Leah, was wringing her hands. She was pretty, like in her pictures, but she looked terrified. I stopped a few feet away from them. I didn't say, "What a surprise." I didn't run to hug him. I just stood there, holding my yoga mat. "Mom," Raymond said. His voice was raw. "How did you find me, Raymond?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it wasn't shaky. I called your bank," he admitted, looking at his shoes. "The old joint account. I told them it was an emergency. I told them I thought you were missing." I just nodded. Of course he had. Even now, he'd lie. He'd manipulate just to get his way. "You're not missing, Eva," Leah said, her voice small. We know you're not. We're so sorry to just show up. We flew in this morning." I looked at this woman, the one who had danced with my son. I felt a surge of nothing, not anger, just a deep, profound weariness. "What do you want?" I asked. Raymond finally looked up. His eyes were swimming with tears, and this time they weren't for a house. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I am so sorry. I've been a fool. I've been a coward and a terrible son." He stepped forward. I took a half step back. He stopped. "I took you for granted," he said, the words tumbling out of him. I assumed you'd always be there. I assumed you'd just wait." I met Leah, and I got so wrapped up in her life, in her family, I pushed you out. It was easier than trying to figure out how to bring you in. And we just decided it was simpler to do it small and tell you later. "Tell me later," I repeated. It wasn't a question. "It was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "It was the worst mistake of my life. And then, when you sold the house, I was so angry. I was so hurt. I couldn't see. I just couldn't see anything but that." "I see that," I said. Leah stepped forward then. "Eva, Mrs. Baldwin, I'm so sorry. It was my fault, too. I was insecure. My family is a lot. I saw how, I don't know, simple your relationship was. Just you. And I was selfish. I wanted him to myself. I didn't want to compete. And I encouraged him to wait. I told him you'd understand. It was cruel. And I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. I am ashamed of myself." I listened. I heard the words. They sounded practiced, like they'd had this conversation in the car a dozen times. But the tears in Raymond's eyes, the genuine shame on Leah's face, that was real. They had come here. They had flown to a city they didn't know, to stand in a hallway and beg. The regret that was promised in the title of my story, here it was standing right in front of me, looking exhausted and broken. The old Eva, the one from Scottsdale, would have burst into tears. She would have thrown her arms around Raymond and said, "It's okay. It's okay. I forgive you. Just come inside." But I wasn't her. Not anymore. I let the silence hang for a long, heavy moment. "I hear you," I said finally, "and I believe you are sorry. I believe you regret it." Raymond let out a sob of relief. He moved to hug me again. "No," I said, not unkindly but firmly. I held up my hand. "Stop. I'm not finished." He froze. "I'm not interested," I said, "in going back to the way things were. That's over. The woman who would have waited by the phone for you, the woman who would have put her entire life on hold just to get a call, she's gone. I sold her along with the house." Raymond's face crumpled. "I'm not saying this to be cruel, Raymond," I said. "I'm saying it to be clear. You can't just apologize and have that woman back. You can't undo this with a plane ticket and some tears." What does that mean, Mom?" he whispered. "Does that mean you don't forgive us?" "I don't know what it means yet," I said honestly. I'm not I'm not full of anger anymore, but I'm also not the fool I was. I'm not your safety net, Raymond. I'm not the person you take for granted anymore. I looked at both of them, two young people looking lost. I am open, I said, to building something new, a new relationship, one where I am not just mom, one where I am Eva, a person you respect, a person you are honest with, a person you don't hide from your life. But that takes work, and it takes time. It doesn't happen here in this hallway. This was the turning point. This was the moment. They were asking for me to erase what they did. I was telling them I wouldn't. I was telling them we had to live with the consequences and start from scratch. I finally stepped forward and put my key in my door. I pushed it open. I turned to them. I just came from yoga, and I was about to make a cup of tea. If you'd like to come in, I can make you one. But we are not going to talk about the wedding. We are not going to talk about the house. We are going to sit for 10 minutes like strangers, and we're going to see if we can just be in the same room. That's where we can start. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reunion. It was a boundary, and it was, for the first time in our relationship, a door that I was in complete control of. Raymond and Leah looked at each other. They looked relieved and terrified and hopeful all at once. "Yes," Raymond said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you. Tea sounds good." I nodded, and I held the door open for them to walk into my new life. That first cup of tea was the most awkward 20 minutes of my entire life. They came in. I took their coats. They sat on my new floral-patterned couch, looking like two children in the principal's office. I made the tea, English breakfast. It was all I had, and I handed them their cups. My hands were perfectly steady. Raymond just stared into his mug. It was Leah who finally broke the silence. This is a very nice apartment, Eva," she said. "Thank you. I like it. The view of the mountains is lovely in the morning." I replied. "You're volunteering? At the library?" Raymond asked, clutching his cup like a lifeline. "Yes, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I sort the donations. You'd be amazed at what people give away," I said. We talked like that, about the weather, about the drive from the Denver airport. We talked about anything and everything except the gaping, massive hole in the middle of the room. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about the months of silence or the pain or the betrayal. It was awful. It was stiff and it was painful. But it was also the first completely honest moment we had shared in years. Because for the first time, we weren't pretending. We weren't playing our old roles. I wasn't the doting, all-forgiving mother. He wasn't the perfect, successful son. We were just three broken people in a room, seeing if we could breathe the same air. After about 20 minutes, Leah set her cup down. We should let you rest," she said. "We're at a hotel downtown." Raymond stood up, his face a mask of exhaustion and confusion. "Mom, thank you for the tea." I walked them to the door. "Thank you for coming," I said. It was formal. It was polite. There were no hugs. There were no "I love yous." He just looked at me, his eyes full of things he wanted to say, but now knew he couldn't just dump on me. I gave him a small, firm nod, and they left. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I saw that first Facebook post. I was exhausted, but I wasn't broken. I had held my ground. The next week was quiet. Then, my phone rang on a Sunday afternoon. "Raymond." I picked it up. "Hello, Raymond." "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was small. I just wanted to call, to see how you were." "I'm well," I said. "I'm about to go for a walk." "Oh, okay." There was a pause. I just wanted to call." "I appreciate that," I said. Talk to you soon. Okay, Mom. Goodbye. And that's how it began. A new relationship built from the rubble. The calls became more frequent. Short, polite, consistent. He'd tell me about a project at work. I'd tell him about a funny thing Marge said at the library. He was trying. He was showing up, asking for nothing, just checking in. About a month later, a package arrived. It wasn't from Raymond. It was from Leah. I opened it. Inside was a beautiful set of cherrywood knitting needles and a book of advanced Irish knitting patterns. There was a simple, handwritten note. Eva, I saw your blue scarf on the couch. I thought you might like these. No strings attached. Leah. It was a small, quiet gesture. It was an apology in a language she knew I'd understand. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just an offering. I sent her a text. Thank you, Leah. They are lovely. My life here in Boulder is full. My relationship with Marge and the other library volunteers has blossomed into a real, deep friendship. We go out for lunch. We've joined a walking group that meets by the creek on Saturdays. I am happy. I was so lonely in that big, empty house in Scottsdale, just waiting. Here I'm by myself a lot, but I am never lonely. My happiness is no longer tied to whether or not my phone rings. My worth is no longer measured by how much my son needs me. I am no longer dependent on his approval. When Raymond calls now, it's nice to hear from him. When he and Leah invited me weeks in advance to fly out for Thanksgiving, I actually thought about it. I ended up telling them no. I'd already made plans with Marge. I told them I'd be happy to see them if they wanted to visit me in Boulder after the new year. Raymond said, "Okay, Mom, I understand. We'll do that." It was as simple as that. I wasn't punishing him. I was just living my life, and his world no longer took priority over mine. This morning, I was on my walk. It was a beautiful, crisp day. The sun was bright, and the air was clean. I walked through the park, and I saw a young mother pushing her little boy on a swing. She was beaming, her face full of that all-consuming love that I remembered so well. The old me, the Eva from Scottsdale, would have felt a sharp, jealous pang of sadness, a reminder of what I'd lost. But I just smiled. I smiled for her, for that moment she was in. I smiled for the memory of it. And then I kept walking. I wasn't walking away from anything anymore. I wasn't running. I was just walking, enjoying the sun on my face. I am more than a mother. I am Eva Baldwin, a woman who has learned the value of her own happiness. My story has been a long and painful journey, but it's one I wanted to share with you. So many of us, we give and we give until we don't even know who we are anymore. My story is a reminder that it is never, ever too late to find yourself again. If my story touched you or made you think, I'd ask you to please comment below. Have you ever felt this way? Do you think I did the right thing by selling the house? That seems to be the big question. I do read the comments, and I would truly love to hear your story. Please like this video and share it with someone you know who might be feeling a little lost and needs to hear this. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. We have so many more stories just like this one to share, and I'd love for you to be here for all of them. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Her Kindle Stories. Thank you for listening.